channel. Before we get started, I really need to issue a major content warning for today's video. I'm going to be discussing child abuse that was perpetuated by Jodi Hildebrandt and Franke of the 8 Passengers channel. There's been a lot of new information that's come out last week. It actually was so much that I couldn't post it last week because I had to keep going through everything. I wasn't able to film on the day that I normally film because there was just so much information to go through. If you like watching well-researched commentary videos about the best and worst things that are happening right now, please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps out and I would really appreciate it. Thanks so much for anyone who does. Because of the content I'm going to be talking about today, I also feel I should disclose I myself am a victim of childhood abuse and neglect. It was not nearly as bad as what these kids went through, but because of that, I've been through some crazy things and I'm a little desensitized to some of these things we're going to be talking about, so I just wanted to make that known. And I've been following this story of the 8 Passengers, the first few clips that were coming out that were being posted by Ruby that got controversy. I've been following this for years now, since I was actually still living with my abuser. So I just wanted to make all of that known, that I may not be looking like I'm upset by the things that we're talking about, but in my head, like, these things are horrible and I feel so bad for what these kids went through. I just want to make their story known so that people, if they don't want to go through 60 pages of the abuser's diary, that they can know what's in it without having to go through all of it. I think that might be beneficial for some people, even other victims that want to know some of the things that have happened but just can't go through all of it themselves. So that's what I'm here to do today. But let's go over a few things that may not be known by some people watching this that should be known before we start talking about all of the new information that was released last week. Ruby and Kevin Franke are members of the Mormon religion and they live in Utah with their 6 children. In 2015, Ruby created the YouTube channel called 8 Passengers, where she would post family vlogging videos talking about parenting, things that she was doing with her kids, things going on in the kids' lives, and they amassed over 2 million followers by the end of the channel's existence. They became quite popular, but not in the way they probably would have wanted. Ruby went viral several times for some of these parenting techniques that she was posting about, and we're going to talk about a few of these. Here's the first one.
I just got a text message from Eve's teacher, and she said that Eve did not pack a lunch today, and can I bring a lunch over to the school? This happens quite often when you're raising children, because I know that her teacher is uncomfortable with her being hungry and not having a lunch, and it would ease her discomfort if I came to the school with a lunch. But I responded and just said Eve is responsible for making her lunches in the morning, and she actually told me she did pack a lunch. So the natural outcome is she's just going to need to be hungry, and hopefully nobody gives her food and nobody steps in and gives her a lunch.
After Ruby posted this, a lot of people started commenting how appalled they were that not only does she expect her 6-year-old child to be able to make a lunch for herself and remember to do that every single day that she goes to kindergarten, but that she would, after her child forgot to bring the lunch, then not bring her one to make sure that she eats for the day. A growing child needs to eat. That is so important. And this was just the first of many times that she would use food to punish her children. Another example of Ruby going way too far when punishing her kids is when she went viral for posting a clip of her son talking about the fact that he didn't have a bedroom for 7 months.
My bedroom was taken away for 7 months and then you give it back like a couple weeks ago.
I don't think our viewers know that.
You've been sleeping on a beanbag.
I've been sleeping on a beanbag since October. And they gave my room back like 2 weeks ago. Oh, I'll give you the reason why I lost my bedroom. I think so. I think this is the reason. At least this is the reason that's been in my head. It's pretty funny, but now that I look back, I mean, it's pretty depressing.
No, we never told our viewers.
That I woke Russell up at 2 in the morning and told him that we're going to Disneyland and he has to pack. And he got up and made his bed all neatly and then packed all his clothes in a suitcase. And then he walked out the door and I'm like, Russell, he was like, what? And he's all happy. Has his sunglasses on.
Do you think it's funny? Because
and then I walk out.
If you think it's funny, then that was 7 months ago. Maybe you need longer without a bedroom.
It was not funny.
Russell got the big bedroom and Chad got the smaller bedroom. And Russell's bigger bedroom also had a bathroom. But what you guys didn't know was Chad didn't get any room. He didn't get anything. He was sleeping on the floor in the family room.
Ruby's reaction to him saying this is quite weird. You can tell that she's a little mad that he said it. She keeps giving him like a side eye, and then not only does she not regret doing that to him, she threatens to do it again. She says that because he thinks it's funny, she can give him longer without a bedroom if he actually thinks it's funny. So she didn't regret it at all. Another clip that garnered quite a bit of negative attention towards the parents, but especially towards Kevin, was the time where they went through all of their children's rooms and they confiscated any items that were considered messy, clutter, out of place, and they put it all in a bag. Then they sat their kids down and filmed them while they told them that they had to do chores all day to earn money. It's not even like really money that they can spend, but earn money. And then they could use it to buy back the items that had been confiscated. And if they didn't pay it back by the end of the day and do enough chores that day to get it, their items would be thrown out. So one of the items was a book, like a school book, like schoolwork. They were going to throw out a child's schoolwork because they didn't do chores to pay for it back. That's disgusting. And the fact that they posted that and thinking that nobody would comment and say how wrong that is, obviously they got negative attention, and every time they got negative attention from any of these things happening, they would post a video saying, well, we're their parents and we can parent however we want, and you can parent your kids how you want, but you can't tell us what to do, basically. And there was never anything posted that felt like it was enough for anyone to get involved. Like, it's messed up, but it's not illegal, you know what I mean? And that was the reason it went on so long, in my opinion, was because they were doing things that were morally wrong but not illegal. While the few events I just spoke about did garner some negative attention, the one that actually garnered the most negative attention and mainstream publicity about this family was when they posted a video discussing that they had sent their teen boy to a wilderness retreat for troubled teens in the Arizona desert.
We debated whether we should talk to the viewers about what's been going on.
We wanted to do the right thing, so we got a lot of opinions from a lot of adults.
We decided it was best to clue you guys in on what's been going on a little bit with Chad, and why Ruby and I are in a hotel room right now in Phoenix, Arizona.
And it would also explain why you haven't seen Chad. Have any of you noticed you have not seen Chad in any of the videos? This is why.
For like a week, right?
I think by the time this video goes up, it's probably been 2 weeks since you've seen Chad. Okay, so I don't even know where to begin. I feel like this all happened so fast that I don't even, like, it was a whirlwind. I think parents will relate to this. Have you ever been in a situation with your kids where you just like, you have to act? Kind of like when your child runs out into the road. I've had this experience with each of my 6 kids, so it's like traumatic. I've done this with each of my kids where your child runs out into the road and you don't have time to emotionally process it. You just act. You just run out there and you grab your kid, and then by the time you get yourself and your kid to safety, then the emotions start pouring in and you start crying and you realize how close you came to losing your kid. That's what I feel like I'm experiencing now. Like, the last 2 weeks I've just been like, go, 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 do it. This is what we're doing. And now that we're sitting in the hotel and I have like Chad's bag of belongings, now the emotions can set in and now I can cry. I haven't let myself do that yet.
Okay, so you're probably wondering what the heck we're talking about. Chad today has just entered the Anasazi Foundation Wilderness Therapy Program, where he's going to spend the next 8 to 10 weeks living in the
Anasazi Desert.
Yeah, the desert mountains of Arizona. And he'll be with counselors and other youth that are trying to figure some things out. So you're probably wondering, what did Chad do? Okay, we're not even going to entertain that stuff, but it's an accumulation of things over years, well before we ever started YouTubing or well before we ever got into social media. And it's reached a point where Chad needs to develop some very basic maturity and skills that he's going to need as an adult. And
this is a chance for like a reset, like a start over, like a do-over, like a fresh beginning.
Yeah. So the idea is with wilderness therapy is if you can survive with these peers in the wilderness with nothing more than the clothes on your back and a couple of field supplies, then there's nothing in this world that you can't tackle.
We did give him a choice. The choices were limited. We had like 3 or 4 choices on the table, and we made it clear what our boundaries are as a family, where we're willing to go, and what we would like to see. Our expectations were very clear. And we made it clear if these expectations, these basic, everyday expectations aren't met, if you don't live within this parameter.
Or demonstrate just basic life skills.
Basic life skills, basic stuff that every adult needs to learn, then this is where we're going. You can do this, you can do this, you can do this. These are our options. And it came to this Anasazi camp. He was like, what is my packing list? Like, what do you pack to go on a wilderness camp? I don't know. I've never done this before. And so I'm like, let me find out. We'll find out. And the guy says, oh, you don't need to bring anything except 36 pair of underwear. When Chad heard it, he was like, I really am going to go live in the desert in my underwear.
Which he's not. They provide
He thought he was,
everything.
though.
They provide everything from the sleeping bag to the clothes that the kids wear.
They give them the shoes.
To the backpack, the shoes. They provide the food that they have to
the
make.
canteen, like they provide everything that you need. They do not sleep in tents. They sleep on the bare ground and
whatever shelter they can
or
make.
if they can make a shelter, they can sleep in the shelter they make. So if the apocalypse ever comes and the zombies come to get us, we'll be very grateful Chad is trained.
He's going to learn how to
survival.
make a fire from sticks and kindling. We did meet these kids, a lot of these kids that got off the trail today, and to hear them talk and to hear how their experience went and to meet their parents was both humbling and exciting and terrifying. Scary. And all of these things combined. Chad, to be honest, is excited. You know, no one's forcing him, no one's dragging him. He's actually really looking forward to this based on the conversations that he's had with the counselors already and what they call the trail walkers. These are the folks, the adults that are out there with the kids in the field. He's going to have an awesome experience, and I can't wait to see how he's going to
mature out there
and mature after this experience.
He's gonna have a lot of growth and a lot of time to think and decide really the quality of person he wants to become. I'm really proud of him. I'm really excited. We will be coming back here in a couple of months and get to hike with him.
Yeah, we'll spend 2 nights out there in the wilderness with Chad. And
he's gonna show us how to get water. He's gonna show us.
He's gonna show us how to survive. He's gonna keep us alive, is what he's gonna do.
Yeah, and they said like it's like the real wilderness out there. There's snakes, there's bears, there's coyotes, cougars. Like it's the real deal.
We want Chad to have some of those experiences.
I think close encounters would be good for him.
Yeah, because those types of experiences can teach you what's really important.
And he'll come home and he'll be like, dude, I survived and there were bears. I can do anything. I'm not scared at all about that kind of stuff. What I lose sleep over is when kids start self-sabotaging their own efforts.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that really concerns me.
Just to stick it to their teachers or to stick it to their parents or family.
And the only person they're really hurting is themselves.
Yeah, and that's the kind of behavior that we're hoping this program can help Chad correct. And so
we're not thinking that anyone's going to be like fixed or corrected, but like
reveal it to him.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Yeah, because no one can fix anybody. A person has to choose if they're going to make changes in their lives. And so I think this experience will reveal Chad and everyone else who's out there to themselves, and they can learn to better themselves or just stay in the mud.
Yeah,
you know
they
what
were
I mean?
saying that the Anasazi way is where nature will reflect back to you the choices that you make. If you choose not to make a shelter, you're just gonna freeze at night. If you choose not to build a fire, or if you choose not to humble yourself and learn how to build a fire out of sticks, then you just eat a very cold, undelicious, unsatisfying meal.
So bottom line, it's going to be a long time before any of us sees Chad. We'll hear from him weekly in letters. The family will, and we'll write letters to him. But in the meantime, if everyone could keep your thoughts and prayers for him and our family, and we're excited to see how all of us, not just Chad, but all of us, are impacted and changed by this experience.
Chad's on the trail, but at home, we're also going to be on a trail. We're going to be walking alongside of him, and we're going to be making commitments for us to change and for us to try to become better parents for Chad and for our other kids. And so we're going to make commitments, and we're going to make sacrifices too. And one of the things I committed to doing today is to go to our temple once a week.
He was there sleeping on the ground in the desert for over 3 months, after already having lost access to his bedroom for 7 months before that. This went majorly viral compared to the other situations because of how disgusting it is. The videos they were making about it were so weird. They were still in the family vlogging style, but they were such serious things. They kept putting all this like upbeat music behind it while they're talking about how excited he is to go there. No, he's not. They said right before that he was scared because he's going to live in the desert in his underwear. Like, he was definitely not excited to go to sleep in the desert on the ground, okay? No child would be excited for that. But they also tried to say that he chose to go there, that they gave him 4 options of what to do because of his behavior, which they refused to talk about, but I'm pretty sure it's just the fact that he was pranking his brother, that Disney situation. I don't think that what he did deserved to go to a troubled teen. Like, they acted like he was doing criminal behavior, like he was doing drugs and in a gang or something. He wasn't. I don't think he did anything that warranted that. It's literally insane that they sent him there. And those videos that they made after are, especially looking back now, super disturbing. In 2022, Ruby stopped posting on the 8 Passengers channel, and it was left dormant. Afterwards, her and Jodi Hildebrandt created a new channel called The Connections Classroom, where they were selling different courses on parenting, life skills, and you could even pay for therapy sessions, which is weird because Jodi Hildebrandt doesn't have a very good reputation in therapy. Her license was suspended for 18 months due to her divulging information that was told to her during therapy sessions. She broke HIPAA laws, and she told a man's wife something that he had said in confidence during their therapy sessions, and it destroyed their marriage. So she had to go through all of these steps to not fully lose her license. She did end up getting it back, but she had to prove that she knew, that she learned from it, that she had to go to classes and stuff, but she did eventually get it back. So she didn't have good credibility, but still somehow thought it was okay to be selling courses like this. Many people who were seeing these events unfold online wanted to try to do something to help these kids. At first it was just trying to get the YouTube channel banned. They used Daddy of 5 as an example. Daddy of 5 was doing really mean pranks on his kids and making them cry, and they would get really upset. So that was considered abusive, and they banned that channel and other channels that they tried to create later. Unfortunately, YouTube never actually did ban the 8 Passengers channel, and it went dormant because Ruby decided to stop posting on it, not because it was banned. There's also multiple times where people called CPS. They were worried about these kids and they wanted them to check out the house. But unfortunately, if they go to the house and they see that they have money, they have a big house, they each have a bed and a bedroom, they have food in the house, they have heat, they have water, and the people are acting nice, there's nothing happening in front of them, and there's no physical signs of abuse like bruises or cuts or anything like that, they're going to close the case. That's just how it is. The same thing happened to me. The abusers, they put on a show, they make it seem different than how it actually is while the evaluator is there. And, you know, a lot of times the kids have to go along with it and say, yep, I'm good, we're happy, none of that stuff ever happened. But unfortunately, I just wish they had done something back then. It could have prevented a lot of this. Any of us who were following this stuff online were upset to find out last August of 2023 that our worst fears were confirmed. There was much worse things happening behind the scenes than any of us knew about. The second youngest child of Ruby, who I will refer to as the 12-year-old, he escaped Jodi Hildebrandt's house, and he found a neighbor who was home and asked them to call the police for him. At the time he was found there, he had this orangey yellow substance on his arms and legs, and around that color that was there was plastic wrap and duct tape. These were dressings that were put on him by Jodi to treat his rope burn on his arms and legs from being tied up. While the police and paramedics spoke to the boy and treated his wounds, he told them that he still had a sister, who I will call the 9-year-old, inside of Jodi's home. That was enough for them to have probable cause to raid Jodi's home and rescue her. They went inside and they did end up finding her, and they took both children to the hospital to be evaluated and to treat the wounds that they had from being tied up by Jodi. Same day the kids were rescued, both Jodi and Ruby were arrested on 6 counts of aggravated child abuse, but they would both later plead guilty with a plea deal, so they actually had 2 counts dropped. They each were sentenced to 4 to 60 years in prison under those 4 counts of aggravated child abuse for the things that they did to those kids in Jodi's home. Now that we've finished with the recap, we can start talking about some of the new information that's been released last week, and I'm going to have some links in my description. The first one is going to be a link to the compilation of all of the video evidence that was just released, and in the description there is chapters so that you can click through to find each individual video. It's over 2.5 hours long, so I'm not going to put any of these clips into my video because I don't want to do that to you or to me. It would be way too long. The second link that I'm putting in my description is going to be a link to the PDF file of the 60-page of journal entries that Ruby wrote. That's a lot as well. I'm not going to be showing any of those myself, but I basically just condensed all of this stuff, all of the information that we learned into like notes, like bullet points basically, to make it easier for me to convey to you over video. So let's get started looking through some of these new details that we didn't know before. The first of the new videos that we're going to talk about is the doorbell footage. So there was some new doorbell footage, first of the 12-year-old going to a neighbor's house. He's there for about 2 minutes knocking on the door and ringing the doorbell, but nobody answers. So he leaves and he goes to another neighbor's house, which is the man who called 911 in the 911 call that had been released a while ago. It's actually a couple, and I didn't know that until now, but it's actually a couple that was there. It wasn't just a man. In this video, you can see there's also a woman there, presumably his wife, who is talking both to him and trying to convey information to him to talk to the 911 operator, and you can hear her also speaking to the boy and asking him questions. They saw his wounds and how skinny he was, and they conveyed that to the 911 operator so that they could get help as fast as possible. The next video is of cops and medics at the scene with the couple and the boy. You can't see them, they're in the background, but these people are a little ways away and they're talking about it. The medic is trying not to break down and cry. She's really upset, and they're discussing how they can smell his wounds. They can smell the wounds on his wrists and his ankles from being tied up. They can smell the rotting flesh. That's how bad his wounds have gotten. You can also see in this footage the cops and medics are talking to the boy and they're asking him questions. This is how they find out that he still has a sister inside of Jodi's home, and that gives them the probable cause that they need to raid Jodi's home to rescue the girl without needing a warrant. There's another new video of when they were going into Jodi's house, when they knock on the door and then immediately enter and have her come outside. She's already on the phone with her lawyer, and she's telling them, I'm on the phone with my lawyer. And she's freaking out about why they're going into her house. Where's the warrant? You need a warrant. You need a warrant. But they actually didn't, and they keep telling her to sit down on the steps and that they'll explain it when someone else gets to the scene. But she won't sit. She's still on the phone with the lawyer. She was mad that they were there, and she even knew that the boy was missing already, but she didn't ask if he was okay. She didn't ask about either of the children, actually. She didn't ask at all if the kids were fine. She didn't care. She only cared about herself at that moment. The next video shows them searching through the house looking for the sister that they had been told existed. They found her inside of a closet off of the bathroom, She was sitting with only a shirt and jeans. She had no socks on, and she actually had her head shaved. So they didn't think that it was a girl. They thought they had found a boy, and they continued to search the house for a girl until they cleared the whole house and realized that she was the girl. They found her sitting alone in the dark inside of this room, and it took them a while to get her out. They eventually, after talking to her for a while, she wasn't speaking much. She was only just really saying that she was nervous. They eventually did give her some pizza and some water, but she was very hesitant at first to take it. I wouldn't doubt that someone who's been through so much trauma, especially around food, would think that maybe Jodi had hired some people to pretend to be cops and come give her food to see if she would take it, and then she could be punished for taking it when she knows she's supposed to be fasting. We'll get into that fasting stuff more when we get to the journals, but it took them about 5 hours, even after eating the food and the water and having to sit and talk to her, 5 hours to get her to feel safe enough to come out with them. And then she was taken to the hospital to be observed and checked over after that. There's a few different videos of the police going through the house while looking for the 9-year-old and discovering different things throughout the house. So the first one that they discovered was the basement. So they had a huge basement, completely empty, except for in the center of the room is one of those stacked washer-dryer machines, and completely empty otherwise. And then on the wall was this huge black safe door, like a really thick, almost like a bunker door. And inside was a Murphy bed, so it can be folded down from the wall if they don't want it out. There is a full fridge, completely empty. There is a sink and a toilet, and there is a lot of cupboards that have, almost all of them had nothing in them. On the counter was rags and other like spray bottles. There's a bunch of them. I don't know what was in them, as they didn't really talk about it, and there's no audio at this time in the video, just visual. But they found also in one of the drawers, they found rope with handcuffs tied to it that was used to bind the children. They also found rope in all of the bedrooms and in the bathrooms, including the one where the closet was off of the bathroom where they found the little girl. So they had ways to tie these children up in almost every room of the house. In the same bathroom with the closet, they found a Tupperware container with a mixture of honey and cayenne pepper with a spoon in it, as well as finding duct tape rolls and plastic wrap rolls nearby. This is what I described earlier that they had used to treat the boy's wounds from tying him up. He had rope burn and other, like, from the handcuffs as well. He just had cuts on him, on his hands and on his feet from being tied up. And instead of actually giving him medical care, they were making it worse by putting a pepper in it. I don't even know what to say about that. That's crazy. They also found actual medical supplies in that same bathroom. Like, they had medical sponges and other, like, different real medical supplies, but those were never used for him. They only used things that aren't meant to be used to heal. There's also a short bit of footage of their pantry. They had a completely full pantry, and these kids were found emaciated, starved. They were being forced to fast, and while there was all that food in the house, they can't eat it. They also found a few items that were used in physical punishment. They found a mini trampoline that would be taken outside, and then the kids were made to jump on it for hours out in the sun, in the heat of Utah. They also found some weights in the basement. One of the only other things found in that basement, besides the washer dryer in that weird safe room, was they found some weights, and they also found some rope. They found out later that what it was used for was they would tie the kids up with the rope, and then they would put the weight on the rope, so it would be pulling on their hands or on their feet. So that's probably why they had so many wounds, as they were putting a weight on them. There's another clip of when Ruby is arrested. So apparently that morning she had left Jodi's house and went to a dentist appointment in a city. So, like, she was quite a ways away. Then she gets a call and finds out what's happening. And so she hauls ass speeding to get back. And as soon as she arrives, she walks right up to them and they ask her if she's the mom, and she says yes. And then they start arresting her and reading her rights. She was very quiet the whole time. She never asked about her kids once. She didn't ask where they are. She didn't ask if they're okay. She was told to stay silent, so she did. She didn't say a word. She didn't even answer their questions. She just looked at them. They almost thought that she was crazy for a second. They kept asking her if she was okay. They were worried about her mental state because she just kept looking at them with this like completely blank stare and not answering any questions, even questions that were not about any of what was happening. Like, do you want a water? She wouldn't answer it. Like, nothing, just nothing. They almost thought that she was like mentally unwell for a second because of that. The next video we're going to discuss has quite a bit of new information in it, and therefore is one of the more important ones I wanted to talk about. It is the interview of Kevin Franke the day that Ruby and Jodi are arrested. He shows up to a police department, and they didn't even know he was going to be coming. Apparently, someone had called him and told him that he had to go there and pick up his kids, but wasn't told why. For some reason, he won't disclose who told him that, but the police reference in the video that it wasn't them. No one from the police department called him, so it must have been a private citizen who let him know that he needed to go there. Kevin has read his Miranda rights before questioning, and then they jump right into it. They start asking him questions about the structure of the family, and he tells them that he has been moved out of the family home for over a year. After Jodi had convinced Ruby to kick him out, he didn't ever talk to her about the kids at all. They all stayed with her, and she did not even discuss anything about what was going on with the kids at all with him. The only time they spoke was in regards to finances, so like money, cars, the house, anything like that. So he only heard from her when it was something important like that, but he never saw the kids, and he never heard anything about any discipline or anything about the kids at all, according to him. When the investigator asks him if he has any idea about the discipline that Jodi and Ruby are doing to his children, he refuses to answer, says he's not comfortable answering that, and he later calls Jodi a honest and respectable person. They ask him if he's aware that his children are no longer living in the family home but in Jodi's house, and he said he did not know that. So they ask him if he is aware of the physical state that his children are in, and he says no, he doesn't. They ask again if he will tell them who called him, because they're confused why he's even there. They weren't ready to talk to him yet, but also if someone told him to come there to pick up his kids, that's really weird because the kids were never at that police station. They went straight to the hospital from where they were found. So they aren't even there to pick up. That's why they asked him again. But he again refused to answer because he said he wasn't sure if the person who called him could get in trouble or not, and he doesn't want to incriminate anybody. They start asking questions about the relationship and the marriage, and he starts talking about why they separated. So when Ruby transitioned from the 8 Passengers channel to the Connections channel with Jodi, they lost 90% of their income. They were making most of their money from the YouTube channel 8 Passengers, and I guess neither of them were working other than that. So they lost most of their income. They were already struggling to maintain the lifestyle they had been living. And then after that, Jodi had convinced Ruby that Kevin had a problem with pornography, that he had an addiction, and that's why he needed to move out of the house. That was not known until last week when they released these videos. That's very interesting to know about because Jodi has done that many times with other couples in her therapy career. She'll tell the wife that her husband has a problem and he's addicted to porn, and then he has to move out of the house, and then she has her claws in the woman and can convince her of things, and she's done it multiple times. They finally fill him in on what is actually happening. They explain to him that his children were found emaciated with wounds from being tied up in Jodi's house, that his son had escaped, and then that they rescued the girl as well, that they're both in the hospital being observed, and that no, he will not be taking his kids home today. After they broke the news to him of what had been happening, they left the room for a bit and gave him a little bit of time to process what they had just said. When they come back, the first thing out of his mouth is, "What's going to happen to my wife? I love my wife." He's not even asking about the children. He's asking about the person who hurt them. He goes off on a little bit of a rant about the fact that he has a picture of his family at the foot of his stairs, and that he looks at it every single day, and that he works really hard to make money to send it to Ruby to pay for everything for the kids. It wasn't court-ordered child support or anything like that. He just worked and gave most of his money to her to make sure the kids were taken care of while they are separated. And he just goes off on this rant about, I work so hard every day to be such a good person, to do better and to make change. He's thinking about her first, then he's thinking about himself, and the kids are where? He's not thinking about the kids at all. It's so crazy that they both act like their kids don't exist because something is happening to them. It's so crazy to me that nobody, not a single person in this situation, was worried about these kids first. It was always an afterthought. He starts to talk about how he feels like he's in disbelief, like he's in a horror movie, and he starts saying he feels responsible for what is happening, which is good. He should feel responsible. He definitely helped create the environment that made Ruby feel safe enough to escalate her behavior. He justified everything that they were doing in these different clips that were up on the channel that created the controversy before this whole situation happened. He was there for all of that. He was there for stuff that happened after the channel was over, too. He was only gone for 1 year. He was a part of almost all of that. And after all that, hearing the things that have happened to his children, he still says he trusts his wife and wants her back. There's another short clip of only a couple minutes from Ruby's interrogation that is very similar to her arrest. So she stayed very quiet again, as she had been told right before that to stay silent and wait for a lawyer. And so she just, with a blank stare, just looking emotionlessly back and forth between the investigators and just saying, I already told you, I want my lawyer. There's also a clip of Jodi's interrogation shortly after they arrested her, and she is much more talkative than Ruby. She answers a few questions about herself, about like where she's from and some other things about her own life, but when they start trying to talk about either the things that she did or even just talk about Kevin and Ruby and what they may have done, she won't speak to them, and she says like, I'm not trying to be difficult or anything, but I'm not going to speak without my lawyer. So she did the same thing that Ruby did, but she spoke a lot more first. There's also a few phone calls from jail between Ruby and Kevin that were released, and we're going to go over some of the information that we found through those calls. The first thing that Ruby asks when she talks to her husband for the first time is if they're in the news, and she sounds kind of excited about it. He says that he's not sure about nationally, but that yes, in the area that they're on the news. She calls the investigation into her and Jodi a witch hunt, which is very, very right-wing behavior to call a very real investigation into your actions a witch hunt. Ruby calls the kids evil, and Kevin has no reaction to that whatsoever. She says it's unnecessary for the children to be in the hospital under observation for 3 days, and that the officials are going to exaggerate the abuse to try to keep them from their parents as long as possible. Ruby says that what they've been doing could look like abuse to other people, even though it's not, because they have no idea how hard it is to cast out evil from a child. And Kevin goes on in response to talk about how they described the wounds to him and that he says it sounded horrible, but that he never actually saw it. Ruby tells Kevin that the most horrible thing about all of this is that her and Jodi are misunderstood, and that all good men of God were misunderstood, and Kevin agrees with her. Ruby starts to show compassion for the other women that she's in jail with, the fact that they're addicted to drugs and that they do illegal things. She shows compassion for them, and it's much more compassion than she ever shows for her kids. Ruby talks about the fact that while she was driving from her dentist appointment, speeding to get to Jodi's house to try to see what was going on, that she actually knew her kids were going to be taken while she was in the car. She said that God told her her kids were going to be taken away, and her reaction to that was, no, I'm not done. I'm not ready. Not done what, Ruby? Abusing your kids? That's, oh my God, she thinks God is talking to her. She's delusional. She then blames Satan for all of her problems, saying that he takes away everything that she loves. Quote, I'm a good woman. I don't do naughty things. I'm a really good girl. No, you're not. I don't know why you think that. I don't know who told you that, but you are not a good girl, Ruby. You did very illegal things. After a few months away, Ruby starts thinking a little bit more clearly about everything and stops defending Jodi so much. She says that Jodi only pled guilty because she wanted to avoid going to prison for life. If they didn't plead, they could have gone away forever with no possibility of ever getting to go home. So she says that she did that to benefit herself, but in the public they were saying that they were doing it to benefit the children so the children wouldn't have to go through a trial. But Ruby also says that she pled guilty because Jodi knew that Ruby would testify against her if she went to trial, and so Jodi had to plead guilty because she knew there was just too much evidence against her. She also was asking to be transferred for court in 2 different vehicles, because usually they just get all the people that are going to court in the same day into one bus. But she doesn't even want to be near Jodi. She thinks that they're going to separate them to take them to court, which I don't think happened, but she talked about wanting that to happen. Ruby even admits on this phone call that she was very gullible and gave over so much power to Jodi, and she doesn't understand how she didn't see it before. She even says that Jodi denies having anything to do with the abuse at first. Like when they first got arrested, Ruby didn't know at the time, but Jodi completely said that, no, I didn't do any of that. It was all Ruby. She basically just tried to blame it all on their mother, when most of it was in fact Jodi, but Ruby did help. Also in this same call, Ruby talks about the fact that the police want to see you take responsibility and have remorse. So she is aware that she has to do that if she ever wants to get out of prison. And so she says in a very joking manner, oh my gosh, what have I done? But it's not serious. She's not seriously regretting what she did. I think she still does believe some of the things they were doing were somehow beneficial. There's also some jail calls from Jodi to an unknown other person. One of the first things she says is, when I get out of here, I have a story to tell. And I think she would try to capitalize and literally benefit monetarily off of the story of these children. She would probably tell it, like try to spin it into a positive, or like, I got arrested even though I was not doing abuse, you know, something like that, trying to justify what they did because they're casting out demons or whatever they believe. She also talks about her lawyer telling her that the photos of the 12-year-old's wounds on his wrists and ankles are going to destroy any defense that they could make, but Jodi says that her and Ruby didn't do it. She says that they actually were rubbing up against the restraints and hurting themselves on purpose to make it look worse than it is. So her saying that, she's basically admitting that she tied them up, but is saying that she didn't hurt them, that her tying the kids up didn't hurt them, they hurt themselves. No. Then she talks about the fact that what she did was right, and that the people around her can't understand how hard it is to cast out evil, and that they will use these kids because they're easier targets. Ruby said the same thing in another of the stuff that was released, so I'm pretty sure that this probably originally did come from Jodi, and that Ruby, when she said it, was mimicking what Jodi had said before. She goes on a little bit of a rant, a religious rant, where she says, quote, "Nobody wants the truth. It's all the devil. He knows I know what he's doing, and he uses these kids. So now it's abusive to make a kid sleep on the floor. It's ridiculous. You can't even discipline your kids anymore." It's like, yes, Jodi, that is abuse. She also goes on to talk about the fact that she had just sold her home and they were about to move out to Arizona when all of this happened, and now she's been arrested. So she's like confused how fast that happened, but what they were doing is they had gone out to Arizona. This is likely after the whole wilderness camp thing where they sent Chad to Arizona. And they were going to buy land out in the middle of nowhere in the desert to move all Jodi and all of the kids out there so that they could continue what they were doing without people being around to be able to help. I am so glad they did not make it out there. I am glad that they were stopped before that happened. The abuse would have gotten probably at least 10 times worse, if not more, when there was no one around to save these kids if they tried to run away or get help. She then talks a bunch of nonsense and quotes some things from the Bible. She talks about the fact that she kind of like knew this was going to happen, or that she had been reading scriptures and knew that the kids were going to turn on her or something like that. But she also said that she was grateful that it all happened because now that she's in prison, she can actually teach the gospel to other people, and she feels that she will be safe because she's under God's protection. And now we're on to the tough part. We've now made it to this part where I have to talk about these journal entries. There is a 60-page PDF file of journal entries that were written between the end of May in 2023 all the way up through August 2023 when they were arrested. So these journal entries detail some of the worst things that they did to these kids leading up to them being arrested. So it literally ends shortly before they got arrested. I'm going to go ahead and issue another quick content warning here. The worst of the worst in this video is going to be in the journals. These things document all of the abuse that Ruby inflicted on her kids, and it even shows that she was very, very present, and that when she tried to blame Jodi for everything, it was not all Jodi's fault. She was very active in the abuse of these kids, and I just wanted to make sure that anybody that could be affected by seeing the worst of the worst and the details of what they did to these kids, you should definitely click off the video now. I have 23 pages of notes of this 60-page document. That was the least I could do to like get it down smaller, and it's still that long. That's how much new information is in these, and it is really disturbing. So just wanted to make sure that you had a chance to click off before I get into the nitty-gritty and the worst things I've seen a human do in the public eye in quite a while. On July 1st, Ruby banishes the 12-year-old outside, including to sleep. He's only allowed to come in to shower or go to the bathroom. On July 9th, Ruby talks about the fact that it's the day before the 12-year-old's birthday, and she says she never could have imagined that he would still be having trouble with urinating and defecating on himself, and most likely that is a sign of his abuse. I don't think that Ruby knows that, but those things are happening because of the physical abuse they're putting him through. She also talks about the fact that even in an affluent home like her own, if you make satanic choices, you will become destitute in life. The next day, on July 10th, she talks about the fact that it's the 12-year-old's birthday now, but that he doesn't even know what month it is. And she can't believe that both the 12-year-old and the 9-year-old are showing defiant behavior and won't control their bodily functions. They're both peeing and pooping on themselves a lot. She says that they're just mad because their sinful lifestyle is being intervened upon. They're doing things to try to stop them from being able to do evil or whatever. She tells her son that he emulates a snake, saying that he slithers around and looks for opportunities when no one is watching, and then he scurries away. And I think she's referencing the fact that he steals food or water sometimes because they're literally being starved. Or an opportunity to escape and run away because they're abusing both of them, you know. She tells the boy that if he wants to emulate Jesus Christ, the Savior, that he has to be 100% obedient. And she then calls him a compulsive liar, and that she never would have suspected it, describing it as a shock to her system. She says she never would have suspected he had a cold, dead heart if she didn't know where to look. And to me, that sounds like another thing that Jodi probably said that Ruby is just repeating here. She says her son has always gotten what he wants, and now that he can't, he's furious. She also says that she told him that if he divulged everything, he would automatically begin to repent for his sins. She told him that he needs God and invited him to fast and pray with her. She says he is in and out of demonic possession, workable and calm one minute, then angry and defiant the next. She says the only consistent thing about him is that he lies. She then moves on to talk about the 9-year-old, saying that while she is better behaved with Jodi, she thinks that she can still manipulate Ruby to get what she wants. And then Ruby talks about the fact that she gave her daughter a pixie haircut, which was not something that she wanted. It was against her will. It was a punishment. That she gave her this haircut so that she would no longer be distracted by her long hair. And she finishes this entry by saying that her son, the 12-year-old, said that he would rather have a glass of water than to have Ruby as a mother. And you know what? I don't blame him for that. He was probably really fucking thirsty. The next day, on July 11th, Ruby writes a very long entry. She says today is a big day for evil. She talks about the fact that her 9-year-old wails all night when she's with Ruby, but when she's at Jodi's house, she is absolutely silent. She sees the crying as a manipulation tactic to try to get what she wants from Ruby. Jodi talks about the fact that when the 9-year-old was screaming, wailing, and throwing a fit, hitting her head on the ground, that Jodi got her to admit that she was only doing it to get attention from her mom. She also got the girl to admit that she's being pitiful. And this reminds me of the information that was released by Jodi's niece, as her niece had also been subjected to this kind of abuse. She would get these kids, including her niece, to admit to things that aren't true. So she would just basically hound them and hound them and hound them until they admit to something, even if there's nothing to admit to. Ruby talks about the fact that she had made her 12-year-old son stand out in the sun with a sun hat on all day, and he didn't want to do it. He kept going into the shade. So She refers to the demon that she believes is in her son, saying he likes the shade. So she pushes her son out of the shade and into the sun, but he walks back into the shade. In response, Ruby prods her son with a cactus, with the pokies of a cactus, onto his bare back. But she says he doesn't even flinch, and that's because he's used to physical abuse at this point. Because he didn't react, she pokes him in the neck instead. She just really wants that reaction. She needs the reaction, right? She says that he's in a trance and doesn't appear to feel anything, but that's just dissociation. It's dissociation to escape the abuse. I, too, have been in that place where something bad is happening, even if it's painful, and you just don't react because it's too much for your brain to handle. After going back and forth and asking him if he knows that Ruby loves him and that Jodi loves him and that God loves him, he's still in the shade. So she goes and gets a bucket of mop water, dirty mop water, and dumps it on him. And she asks him if it feels good. And he says, "Yes, ma'am, it does." An hour later, he's still not standing in the sun like he's supposed to, or if he is, he's going back and forth between the sun and the shade. So Jodi takes him on a little bit of a walk to the pool and tells him that he has love twisted. He thinks that if someone does something he likes, then it's love, and that if he doesn't like what someone is doing to him, then it isn't loving. So she's justifying the abuse that they're perpetuating on him and convincing him that just because he's being hurt by them doesn't mean that it's abuse, when absolutely it is abuse. This child did not have a demon inside of him. That's literally crazy. While having this conversation, Jodi suddenly pushes him into the pool unexpectedly and then asks him if it felt good, and he says yes, because he always agrees when they ask something sarcastic like that, because he's probably been trained that he has to. He's sent back to stand in the sun again, and an hour later, Ruby comes out and asks him if he wants to go in the pool again. He says yes, but she says that he's trying not to act too excited about it. And in my opinion, it's probably because every time he likes something or acts excited about something, it's probably taken away from him as a punishment. So he wants to keep being able to go in the pool to cool off from the sun, and so he has to act like it's not something that he wants to do. So she lets him jump in the pool, and then after he comes out of the pool and returns to his spot in the sun, she grabs his face and says, "Have you ever heard someone talk underwater?" And he says yes. While still holding his face, she tells him that she knows the real 12-year-old, I'm not going to say their names, the real 12-year-old is in there somewhere under all that anger, and that it might sound like she is underwater with him, but that she loves him. He gets a little teary-eyed, according to Ruby, and then she quickly puts her hand over his mouth and nose, covers his mouth and nose. She says she is coming to him underwater and covering his mouth and nose while the devil lies and says she is hurting and abusing him by doing so. She asks him to say what she is actually doing, and his reply is, "Putting oxygen on me to help me breathe." So she's literally restricting his airways as a metaphor for trying to save him from the devil, which is not actually happening. And then convincing him that it's not abuse, because he obviously knew that it was. A couple hours after this happens, Ruby says that he actually sneaks into the house and steals some water. And that she says that he is compulsive and he feels no remorse for his choices. His choice was to drink water when he's thirsty, but she thinks that's bad somehow. She says that he shuts down and he wants to go to jail, which is why he thought he would go to jail when he was trying to get help from the neighbors. He thought, when he asked them to call the police, that he was going to be taken to jail to atone for his sins, because he just didn't want to be at the house anymore and knew that running away was illegal, because that's what they said, which it's not illegal, but he was scared and he believed them and thought that he would go to jail for doing so. So when he went to the neighbor's house to ask them to call the police or take him to the nearest police station, it wasn't to get himself or his sister help. It was because he thought he had to go to jail, but he just didn't want to be in their house anymore. That is so fucking sad. Claims that her son says that he worships the devil and that he doesn't want to change. Quote, "I want the outcome of being changed, but I don't want to do the work that it requires." And that's because that work is abuse. Obviously, no one would want to go through that. She says he doesn't actually know what jail means and that he doesn't even understand what throwing your life away means. So I think they probably had threatened him with jail more than once to scare him into being compliant, and that's why he thinks he's going to go to jail. She said he wants just the instant gratification of sitting in an air-conditioned car ride to juvie. She claims that after stealing the water, he looked like he wanted to fist up, so like wanting to fight her. And she put her hands on his shoulders and told him that she loves him and that he has no idea what he is doing, but she does. With her hands still on his shoulders, she says, "Give your demon friend a message for me. I will not rest. I will not stop. I will not leave. I will fight him until the day you die. I have the power of God and he must obey. I beat Satan. I win." Then with power and authoritative command, she screamed, "Get out now! Go!" And she says that the child immediately smiled, cried, and then slumped, saying, "He's gone! He left!" Oh, man. I can't believe she truly believed that. And the fact that she says until the day you die, most parents die before their children do. I think that she was thinking he might die from this. And I'm so glad that he didn't die from this abuse. It's very possible that if they had been able to move to the middle of Arizona desert like they had planned, that would have happened. At least one of these children would have died from the abuse because it's so extreme. After this event takes place, she takes the 9-year-old and the 12-year-old for a drive in the car to a gas station where she tells them that they are never going home. I think that at this point they had been there a couple months and they had not told them yet that they were going to live there permanently. I think that might be the first time that she told them, like, "You're not ever going home again." I bet they thought that if they were good enough, they might be able to go back home and live their normal lives again. But no matter what they could have done, these children were never going to go home. It was never going to be good enough for these people because they enjoyed doing these things to them. They drive after leaving the gas station for a little longer, then pull over somewhere to watch the sunset. While they're doing it, she says that the 9-year-old needs to stop with the fantasy and that she is not innocent. She tells her daughter, "You are not innocent." She tells her not to waste any more time and that she can only be innocent if she repents. She also finds out that they had been counting the days and that he actually did know it was his birthday. The 12-year-old knew it was his birthday and that Ruby did absolutely nothing for him for his birthday. He knew it was his birthday, but she didn't know that he knew. So she just never sent anything and acted like it wasn't his birthday, and he knew the whole time that he was supposed to be having a party like he had in the past, but that his mom was so far gone into this delusion of the connections and all these, the fact that he has a demon in him, that he didn't even get a birthday. He was aware the whole time. Ruby asks the 9-year-old to guess how long they had been at Jodi's house living there, and she guessed about 8 weeks, which was correct. And then Ruby asks her if she has made any progress while she's been at Jodi's, and the girl says yes, she thinks she has made progress. Ruby is apparently surprised by this. She calls her daughter delusional for thinking she has made any progress, as she has actually made none at all. Not even a little. That's what she told her daughter. "You have made no progress in 8 weeks. They're not obedient enough. They cry. They want water. They won't follow directions because it's abuse." That's the kind of thing that she's thinking while doing this. It's literally insane. And then she says the 9-year-old continues to lie and manipulate by screaming and going into a trance, banging her head, which is proof that she's made no progress. You just told your daughter that she has not done anything, that all of the stuff that she has been through these 8 weeks living with Jodi was for nothing, that she thought she was doing well, and you absolutely crushed her dreams, telling her, no, you've made no progress at all, and then calling the fact that she's crying about that manipulation. The fact that Ruby thinks she's not mentally unwell herself is in and of itself crazy, because she absolutely has something wrong with her mentally if she thought that was okay. The next day, on July 12th, they go on a 4-hour car ride with Ruby and all the kids, and they see a baby cow get loose from its enclosure and walk out in front of them into the road. She used it as an analogy for the children's own actions, that they're a not-so-wise calf, saying that she is keeping them safe while they try to run into the road. Basically saying, the abuse I'm doing to you is because of your choices. You keep walking out into the road where you're going to get hit, and I have to do the hard thing, which is save you from getting hit. She stops and buys a pie for Jodi to thank her for opening her home and spending her time trying to help these kids. Both of these kids are starving at this time, and they hadn't eaten for 2 days, according to Ruby. And she's holding this pie in front of them while they're so hungry. Ruby mocks the 9-year-old for thinking that she's going to get to eat any of this pie. She doesn't say anything to her in the car, but she just, in the journal entry, is mocking the girl for thinking she's going to be able to break her fast, and says that she is manipulating by talking or crying or something like that. She doesn't specify what manipulation happened that time, but she says she's trying to manipulate to be able to break her 2-day fast. So after being in the car for so long with that pie, tempting them, right? They get home, they give the pie to Jodi, and then Ruby informs both the kids that they're going to add another day for going from 2 days to 3 days now of fasting. And obviously the kids don't take it well. The 9-year-old starts, according to Ruby, flips out and begins ranting, refuses to get up. And she says the 9-year-old lays on the floor all day speaking dishonest chants. Ruby says that Jodi's on the phone at the time, so Ruby can't match her level of aggression, meaning that she would have just started screaming and wailing back at this child if there wasn't someone on the phone that could have heard it. And she says that the daughter is saying many different things during this rant. She says, "My mom starves me and calls it fasting." True. "My mom won't lift 2 fingers and bring me food because all she does is lie on the bed and eat brownies. She's not fasting, but her children are. She gets to eat, her children don't." That in and of itself is crazy. It's abusive. And to eat brownies in front of these kids while they're starving, the same with the pie. It's like they get off and they enjoy putting these kids in these horribly emotionally and physically abusive situations. I feel like they invented this satanic, demonic possession just to have a reason to continue to hurt them more than they had already been. Here's some more quotes from the girl. She says, "If I can't ever go home, then what is the point of being obedient?" And also saying, "I'm going to run away." Once Jodi's off the phone with whoever she was talking to business-wise, she helps Ruby to intervene with the child freaking out about having to have another day of no food. And they start talking about the fact that allowing lies to be spewed gives the devil a platform, and that articulating these lies reinforces the demonic possession. She says that the longer that they allow these lies to be spewed, the longer and more physical the intervention needs to be. Basically blaming these kids for the abuse escalating when there's no demon to begin with. Nothing they could do would make this stuff stop. It was just going to always continue until someone stopped them from being able to have these kids in the house anymore. Because of how badly the 9-year-old reacted to them giving her another day of fasting, they decided to punish her. They put her inside of a dog washing sink, and before she had long hair, one of the earlier journal entries, they talked about cutting her hair to a pixie cut, so that's not like shaved down, but like quite short. And now this time they're putting her in the dog sink, and they're basically almost completely buzzing her head down. Not completely bald, but very short. And she said she wants to run away, and Jodi tells her she has no idea what is waiting for her. And then there's one last sentence of that entry that is completely redacted. There are full pages later on as well that are redacted. I will mention when that happens, but there is some information here that's redacted, and that was one of them, was the last sentence of that entry. The next day, on July 13th, Ruby talks about letting the 12-year-old break his fast that morning with brown rice, lentils, black beans, chicken, and water. So in between all of the fasting, when they do get to eat, she feeds them almost the exact same thing. Ever since they went to Jodi's, so these 8 weeks or so, and onward until they get caught, these kids are forced to eat the same thing every time they eat. They're always eating rice, lentils, and beans, and then they're lucky if they get the chicken, and then they get water. The only thing they ever get to drink is water. So she lets him break his fast, and while he's eating, there's a hornet buzzing around all his food. So Ruby uses it as an analogy for Satan, saying, "Would you become pals with Satan? Would you sell your soul or chicken to a hornet? He will sting you in the end." And the 12-year-old uses his sun hat that he wears when he's being punished to stand in the sun all day. He uses that hat to catch the hornet and trap it. Because of the 9-year-old having a freak out the day before about not wanting to fast for a 3rd day, they didn't let her break her fast until later that day, where she got cheesy potatoes, steak, oatmeal, and water. And it seems like she got a little bit less than he did that time. She at least got some different things besides the rice and lentils and chicken. She did get some other things, but I'm guessing that it was leftovers from what they were making for the other 2 teens, because there are 2 other teens, 14 and 16, that live in this house with them. They just haven't been mentioned yet. I'm guessing that it was from the food that they had made for them, or food that they had made for Jodi or Ruby to eat, and that they just gave her that because it was later in the day and they didn't want to make more rice and more lentils up for her. An hour and a half after the 12-year-old had eaten his breakfast, he was told by Ruby and warned that the food would energize him to either tell the truth or to be defiant. One or the other, no in-betweens. He soils himself, and she calls him defiant. She says that the poop in his pants is too watery, so he must not have been fasting. She basically just accuses him of having stolen something, and he admits to stealing water 3 times the day prior. So she knows that he hasn't had that much water according to her, so his poop should be not as watery. And she knows that he lied because she's inspecting his fecal matter in his pants. Just think about that for a second. How far would you have to go away from loving your child to do something like this to them? I cannot even fathom the justifications in her mind that all of this stuff was okay. Here's a quote from Ruby. These selfish children who desire only to take, lie, and attack have zero understanding of God's love for them. She talks about them not knowing that Jodi is selling the house so that she can purchase that land in Arizona. And she claims that Jodi was specifically looking for land with cactuses that were close by, whether it was either to make it harder for them to escape or so that they could use it like she had before as a torture device to poke them with it. Didn't specify which one, but it's probably both. Ruby talks about the fact that Jodi is willing to accept in a less than ideal home so that the land fits the needs that they have to be able to abuse these and contains these kids easier than they had been. Here's a quote. This is a spiritual matter. I can't in good faith leave you with these 2 gremlins. I won't do that. These are God's children. And that was a quote from Jodi to Ruby about the kids. An hour after all of this, Jodi takes the 14-year-old on a road trip to look at that property in Arizona. The 12-year-old is being defiant while the 9-year-old is lying on the floor. They force the 12-year-old to go outside into the desert to clean himself up because he had pooped himself, and they send him outside to clean up after that. Once he's cleaned up, they make him sit and stand on the patio in the shade so that he's outside as a punishment, but that they can still visually see him from inside of the kitchen, so that they can be inside in the AC and see him from where they are. The 9-year-old was told to sit in the pantry, and the person writing, which I think was Ruby, sometimes it's hard to tell because it looks a little different, but they think that the kids believe they have won and think that they have got what they wanted and get to relax. But then, pop, they will drop them off out in the desert in Arizona for their new home. And here's some quotes. You're going to get exactly what you asked for. Oppositional force is required for growth, development, maturity. The 9-year-old and 12-year-old have never experienced oppositional force. They are very weak-minded. Sending evil away in a long-time possessed person is not a one-and-done deal usually. And then they claim that the demons inside of the children have been friends long before this life, meaning that they believe the 2 different demons that took over these kids know each other and have been friends for hundreds or thousands of years, and that's why they took over siblings, because they know each other. This stuff is so crazy. Here's a quote from Ruby. How the 9-year-old and 12-year-old got to come and get a body can only be explained in me advocating to be their mother. This is not a conceited statement. God knew I would take my responsibility to mother seriously. What do you even say about that? No, you didn't. You abused your children. You're in prison for it, and you admitted to it. But, she was really able to convince herself what she was doing was okay, and that these kids actually had demons inside of them. She even makes it seem like they only were born because she advocated to be their mother. No, they were born because you were married and had sex with a man. You didn't advocate anything. It just, the way that she speaks about things is so weird sometimes. Ruby talks about the fact that Jodi volunteered to help and that the kids are very weak-minded and calls them fools. And then the 9-year-old says that she would choose the devil over God, and Ruby calls her very arrogant for saying that. Quote, God is patient not to split her with a bolt of lightning. You do not tempt a God who controls your very breath. The disdain and hatred they have for God is beyond my ability to describe. My spirit is offended. They're being abused so badly, and it's all religious abuse too. So they're being told all the time that they need to believe in God and that they need to do this, they need to repent. And of course, after a while of being so uncomfortable, the way that they abuse them and hurt them and starve them and keep them thirsty, who wouldn't hate God after that? Who wouldn't say, if God could let this happen, he's not a God I want to believe in. He's not a God I want to follow. And I don't blame them for getting to that point. But unfortunately, it did make their abuse worse because these people were insistent that these kids needed to believe in God and repent for sins that never happened. Ruby talks about the fact that doing good work, is the way to get Satan to go away, that he can't be there if good work is being done, which I believe is a really strong Mormon belief. That's why they do all the missions and stuff like that. But the reason that they were looking for a bigger property is that they wanted to build a ranch on this property in Arizona that they were going to take the kids to, and they wanted to have the kids work on the ranch and do all the chores for the ranch. She says that she wants the kids to get a good kick from a horse and a cactus to run into, that would help them. She then asks the 12-year-old who's standing in the shade what he is thinking about, and he says, "What I want," which is probably to escape these horrible women that are abusing him. So she asks him what he wants, and he says, "More different food and a soft bed." So Ruby says, "Why don't you ask Satan? Do you think Satan will give you those things?" To which he says, "No." So she asks, "Why not?" And he says, "Because he doesn't have the power." So she says, "Why would you serve a God who has no power to give you your desires? Dumb." And he doesn't say anything back. Ruby then goes on to talk about the 9-year-old having another episode and saying that she's with the demons and that she gives herself to them. And then the girl agrees with Ruby to stop being deceptive with her facial expressions, crying, and whining. And then there's a quote, "Whining is the devil's voice. Whining is always a demon." She says the 9-year-old's hurt facial expressions blame her for her misery and that she is at the center of her own misery. I didn't know facial expressions can talk, but apparently they do, and they tell Ruby lots of things, just like God tells Ruby lots of things, right? So they made the 9-year-old girl, because she was having a bit of a fit, they made her do stair walks, which I believe means she just walks up and down the stairs, and then sometimes they give her a box or another heavy item that she has to hold and carry up and down the stairs to do. It's like a really physical punishment. And after she's done with that, they had her sit down on a park bench looking out at the mountain view just outside of Jodi's house. And they told her to just sit there and be still and eat her dinner, which her dinner was carrots, hummus, grilled cheese, and water. And after eating, Ruby says that she did a power play by bringing the empty plate to the door and removing her sun hat. I don't really understand how that's a power play. The only thing I can think of really is the fact that they told her to sit still, and the fact that she got up to bring her plate in was the power play, when she was probably just trying to make sure that she doesn't get in trouble for not picking up after herself, because that's one of many things that I'm sure they have her do, is clean the house. They were having these kids clean other people's houses. I'm sure she's cleaning Jodi's house too. The next day, on July 14th, right after waking up, the 9-year-old is reminded by Ruby that if she cries, whines, or squints her eyes at her, or sours her face, that they would cut her hair off, saying if she is going to act so sick, that she is going to look sick too. So she agreed with a smile to not do those things, according to Ruby. You gotta remember, a lot of this stuff is from the abuser's perspective. I guarantee you these kids aren't agreeing with a smile to these things. Ruby tells the 9-year-old that because she didn't listen the night before, she would have to do 2 sets of boxes and stairs, which is carrying the boxes up the stairs, with only a 5-minute break in between. And the girl did the first set easily and agreeably, according to Ruby, but then after the 5-minute rest, she began whimpering. When she got to the bottom of the stairs, she slipped and dropped the box. And Ruby puts slipped in quotes, so slipped, because she's trying to make it seem like she thinks that the child did it on purpose to be defiant. As a result of dropping the box, Ruby puts her in the dog wash sink and shaves her head, sending her back to continue the box's punishment afterward. So they had already cut her hair the day before. Maybe they didn't cut it all the way down, but they cut even more this next day because she slipped at the bottom of the stairs. She probably didn't even do it on purpose. It was probably an accident because she's so physically exhausted from the physical punishments as well as not eating so often that she just fell. And then there's a conversation between Ruby and the 9-year-old. It's heavier than boxes, right? I think she's talking about the possession. And the girl says, yes, ma'am. She says to the girl, I can help you find relief. You have told so many lies about me that you refuse to be obedient. Why do you keep being buddies with Satan? And the girl replies, I don't want to work. And Ruby says, don't you see it's because you follow Satan that you keep having to do boxes? If you were humble, you would be inside making pancakes with the 14-year-old and I. And then Ruby tells her to sit on the park bench from yesterday where she ate her dinner and think about her choices, but that if she were to move, get up, fidget, talk, or take her sun hat off, she would be going back to do more physical punishments with the boxes. The 9-year-old agreed eagerly and promised to be obedient, according to Ruby. And then after an hour, she was moving a little bit, like fidgeting a little, and looking around. And so Ruby pulled her into the house and sent her back to doing boxes, which is like, what 9-year-old can sit completely still, not move any of their body at all, and not look around their surroundings? Every 9-year-old would do that. She's punishing a 9-year-old for being a 9-year-old. That is absolutely insane. Ruby goes on to talk about a conversation that she has with her 12-year-old, where she says, you like sleeping on the hard ground? I slept on a soft bed. He says, I slept really well. And she says to him, you are mean. Do you enjoy being mean? And he says, yes, ma'am. And she says, do you expect me to feed you? And he says, yes. And then Ruby leans over to him, I will feed the 12-year-old. I will not feed a demon. So I will check on you in a bit. And if you want food, then be prepared to tell the truth about your behaviors. Tell the truth of who I am. And then an hour later, she asks him, are you ready? And he says, no, ma'am. And so she says, so you would rather have no food and worship the devil? And according to her, he says, yes, ma'am. Ruby goes on to describe that her 9-year-old does some books punishments and then gets a 10-minute break. The girl gets upset because she doesn't want to do boxes, but she does do them anyway. She then sits on the park bench for 1 minute, and then she picks a blossom off of one of Jodi's plants that are near her, and Ruby calls this defiant, which, what kid hasn't picked a bud off of a plant? Like, come on. Every child has done that. She assigns her more boxes for pulling this blossom off of the plant, but the girl refuses and goes to sleep on the basement floor. Ruby says both of the kids pick their noses until they bleed as a distraction from all of the things that are happening. Most likely a distraction from the abuse or just some type of nervous, it's like a tick. It's like a way to stimulate themselves because they're missing stimulation they would get in a normal day-to-day life as a child if they had parents that cared about them. She puts another conversation that she has with the 12-year-old here where she says, you happy? And then he says, no. She says, following Satan doesn't make you happy? Shocker. So Satan can't feed you? Who is supposed to feed you? And then he says, God. And she says, and he says, Christ. So she says, this is a game you play. Who brings you food? And he says, you. And she says, you want to leave the demons. And then he says, I don't want to humble. She tells him that she wants to give him chicken for dinner, but he needs to acknowledge his behaviors. He tells Ruby he is missing his opportunity to repent, but this is not acknowledging his behaviors as Ruby wanted. So she tells him that he is treating her and Jodi the way that he believes he really deserves to be treated. There is a redacted sentence after that as well, so I'm not really sure what that is, but she doesn't end up giving him chicken, even though she had already mentioned to him that she wanted to. So instead, he gets brown rice, beans, lentils, and water. There's that same very basic, bland, just enough to give them to eat, to not die, right? He takes the bowl and starts eating, but doesn't thank her. So she says, what, no thank you? Are you going to even acknowledge the woman you've been abusing just brought you dinner? And he's probably so hungry, all he can think about is eating, right? So of course he would be. And he says, well, I would say thank you, but I wouldn't really mean it. So she took away his food and his drink right there for saying that, and he didn't ever get anything else to eat that day. So he only got to eat whatever he was able to eat before she took it from him. He then tried to go back on what he said. Obviously, he still wanted to be able to eat, so he tried to undo what he did there by saying that and upsetting her. And he says, and then she says, I will not talk with a demon. Your soul is damned, and I will not hear your damnable words. So she sent him to bed, because she uses the word sent him to bed. He doesn't sleep in a bed, Ruby. He sleeps on the ground outside, because that's where you make him sleep. But yes, she sends him to bed, and he sleeps on the floor. And then after this, she sees that the 9-year-old is doing the stairs, but without the box, like she's supposed to, and that she is slipping and falling on purpose, where she's probably just tired and exhausted, right? So she calls the 9-year-old pitiful for acting like she was dying out in the heat, and that the heat in hell is much hotter, and God is going to burn the wicked, so either get used to it or start changing. In reply to her mom, Ruby, mentioning hell, the girl says, I don't really think that's actually going to happen. It's showing that these kids don't believe in God anymore because of the extreme religious abuse that they've gone through. They don't believe in him anymore, and I don't blame them, because how could you if God's letting all these bad things happen to you, right? Ruby gives the girl mashed potatoes, turkey, and milk, and then sends her to bed also, which again is the floor. They don't get to sleep in beds anymore. Then she talks about the fact that the 14-year-old and Jodi are looking at RVs. They were thinking about buying an RV. And then she says that the kids have no idea how many sacrifices that Jodi, Ruby, and Jesus have made for them, and that they are ungrateful about it. This journal entry is where things start to heat up a little bit. This is the next day. It's July 15th, 2023. The 12-year-old boy, that morning at 1:15 a.m., he escapes and leaves Jodi's property. He was sleeping outside on the patio outside of the sliding glass door in Ruby's room. So he was already outside. He didn't have to sneak out a door to escape. He was just already outside. He decided to leave. Ruby says that God gave her a miracle that she will absolutely never forget, and that when God gives you an errand, you do the best you can to fulfill it because he will protect you. She went to bed that night around 12:10 a.m. with the 9-year-old sleeping on the floor beside her, and like I said, the 12-year-old was sleeping in the patio outside of the sliding glass door in her bedroom. She says she is shaking while writing this, and if their friend Pam, who had also been arrested the same day as they were, because some of the kids were at her house that day cleaning her house as a punishment, if Pam hadn't volunteered to take the 16-year-old to take a test that she was supposed to take that day, then Ruby wouldn't have even been home at the time that this happened. So she's very grateful, saying it's a miracle from God that she was home, and that Jodi's and her life and her whole family's lives would have forever been different if he had not been found. So obvious foreshadowing to what would eventually happen the next time that he ran away. Thank God he got help. God. Okay, so at 2:45 a.m., she says she woke straight up out of bed and could see through the door that he was not sleeping outside the door anymore. He had left a message spelled in rocks, but Ruby claims she was so scared that she had forgotten how to read. She is so dramatic. Ruby ran to Jodi's room and woke her up so that they could go out and search together. Then she finally goes back and reads this message. It says that he left in the rocks. It says, jail, I will call when I get there. That's how much this child thought that he was going to go to jail for everything that he had done. He had not done anything jail-worthy, and he thought that he was going to go to prison for life because of his sins and for being possessed by a demon. So they are looking around. They don't see him anywhere. Ruby and the 14-year-old check in the house and the yard while Jodi grabs the flashlights to help them look because it's in the middle of the night. Jodi and the 14-year-old, after they look around the house, they leave in the car to search while Ruby gets in her own vehicle saying that they need a miracle, and she goes in the opposite direction that the 14-year-old and Jodi go in. So she writes a few sentences of prayer saying she has done everything he asked and asking him for protection for her and Jodi. She doesn't mention the kids here. She's not asking for protection for her child who ran away. She's asking for protection for herself and Jodi from the abuse they perpetuated on this child, hoping that he doesn't find someone and get help and that they can get him home before anyone notices how abused he is. She's only caring about herself. It's never about the kids. She says that while she's driving along, she hears a thought in her head that says, go right. And she actually goes left first to rule out that cul-de-sac. And then she realizes when she comes back that she hadn't seen him anywhere there. She realizes that it actually was God telling her to go right. So she goes right. and she sees him a ways down. She goes a ways down that road. She sees him walking on the side of the road. She calls Jodi to tell her that she has found him, and then she gets out, and he is very shocked to see her. She says, "Get in the car. Are you shocked to see me?" He nods and gets in front with Ruby, with a redacted passenger being in the back. I think it might be the 16-year-old, because she had mentioned that the 14-year-old went with Jodi. The 16-year-old also lives in the house. She would probably be up and awake during this type of situation. It's likely the 16-year-old, but it's not confirmed. She recalls the timing of everything and realizes it only took them 29 minutes to find him. The 14-year-old and the 9-year-old go back to sleep while the 12-year-old stands in the garage where Ruby can see him. She says he has no remorse, no fear, and no expression. That he is cold, calloused, and hard. That he is angry, he doesn't call the shots. No, Ruby, he was so scared of the things you're doing to him that he tried to run away, and he was caught. Now he's terrified of what kind of punishment is going to happen from that, because he's been punished for all these things for doing nothing at all wrong. And now he's actually done something really bad in their eyes, and he's worried, how much worse can this punishment get? Jodi and Ruby decide that they should just bide their time until they have an environment more conducive to an intervention, meaning the land that they were looking to buy in Arizona. She recalls that the spirit told Jodi, "Don't let those kids' choices ruin your life." She says that they both have work to do. Ruby brought him into the house to try to de-escalate the situation happening, and then she tied a rope from his foot to her foot and from her chest to his chest. She mocks his previous request of wanting a soft bed, saying he will now sleep in a soft bed with her tied up with ropes. 7 a.m. when they finally wake up for the real day after all the excitement in the middle of the night, Ruby says that the devil got a bed. The 14-year-old loaded a cooler and the kids were put in a car and they were going to go for a drive. At 8 a.m., a man went to look at Jodi's house as they were trying to sell it, and then at 8:30 a.m., Jodi and Ruby meet up at a gas station. Jodi, the 14-year-old, and the 9-year-old go to Tucson, Arizona to look at that land again, or look at other lands while they're trying to figure out which one to buy. They're accelerating on their plan to get this land because he ran away. Ruby leaves the gas station after handing over the kids to Jodi and brings the 12-year-old back to Jodi's house with her. She brings him inside and he doesn't leave her sight at all that day. She feeds him chicken, rice, lentils, beans, and a glass of milk. He sits on the counter and eats, and she says that he got what he wanted. She gives him a book, and he gets a pen and his journal. He's taking notes about this book, and she says to an onlooker he appears to be a well-behaved, studious young man. Her son, who tried to run away, is now reading and writing by her side. She now knows that to keep her son, she will need to start sedating him again. And in my notes is just a bunch of question marks and exclamation points because I had no idea until I read these journal entries that she was sedating these kids. She never specifies exactly what she was going to sedate him with, but she was giving him something that was making him tired and lethargic so he can't fight back as much. That is fucking horrendous. Here's a quote from Ruby. "I unhooked him from all the bells and whistles and asked him to break a thrive on his own, and he went into arrest and distress." Now, if you don't know what some of those things mean, you might be really confused what even happened here, what she's saying. So I'm going to try to describe it. I think this is what she means, that she untied him from the ropes, the bells and whistles, and she asked him to use a Thrive product, which is an MLM. Thrive is an MLM, which a lot of Mormons and religious people, especially in Utah, perpetuate these MLMs. Like, I don't know if she sells them or if she just uses them for her and her family, but she tried to get him to break one of those Thrive packets and consume it, and he wouldn't do it on his own, and he got upset because she was asking him to. She said that this situation, him denying taking the Thrive product, proved to her that she needs to sedate him again. She says the demon is still in there, so she purposefully put him back to sleep, sedation, and called it a hibernation. She goes on to compare the situation that she's going through of trying to get compliance from her son, knowing that there is a demon still in there and that he is still so sick. She compared it to a doctor who stitched up their patient after surgery, knowing that they still have cancerous cells inside of them and knowing it is only a matter of time before they're gonna die. She is so insanely dramatic. I can't believe she compared herself to a doctor. She's literally just abusing her child and thinking that she's treating this child of a demonic possession. She says that the 9-year-old and the 12-year-old do not want to repent. that they hate God per their own behaviors and words. She says she now sees how a perfectly reasonable people walk around hating God and worshiping the devil, yet appear to be good people. You mean like you? I mean, you don't worship the devil, but you're still walking around pretending to be a good person when you're not, and you're abusing your kids so severely. She did that exact thing, but doesn't even realize she's being a hypocrite. She goes on to say there is a soul-killing infection inside of her child, and her hand is forced to not remove the infection. In quote-unquote, agency does not allow me to rid the infection. She says that the 12-year-old and the 9-year-old like the infection, and that it is so sick. At 8:18 p.m., Jodi texts Ruby saying, "I found the land." Ruby says the devil does not want them to take these children out of society or to find this property. He wanted Jodi and Ruby at the police station, not discovering the place to bring these children for an intervention to his entanglement. She says how good the Lord is to those who risk everything to follow him and bring others to him. She says her children will never know sacrifices and lives put on the line to offer a chance for their salvation. She says a 12-year-old can only think that he likes the taste of milk and reading again. The next day, on July 16th, Ruby talks about the fact that she tied herself to the 12-year-old again that last night to sleep, from her torso to his and from her legs to his, and that they slept from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. with no interruptions. She says she watches him shower now, and then she showers while he stands inside the closet, the one where his sister was found when they were saved. And she feeds him, that morning, she feeds him chicken, rice, beans, lentils, and cheese on a corn tortilla. She makes him do 30 push-ups after he eats. He then reads the same book he was reading the day prior, and at that point in time, Ruby says Jodi is on her way home after finding the land. The 9-year-old spent the entire ride home from Arizona lying face down, facing the back of the seat of the car, so she doesn't know where they went and she doesn't know why they went there. Ruby then goes on to wonder if maybe she had more slowly introduced the children to the idea that they were possessed with demons and that they needed to do certain things to rid themselves of the evil, that maybe they would have been more willing to help her in her task to heal them. So instead of a full day of carrying boxes, they could have done an hour with breaks and then reading and then go back to the boxes after. So she's talking about a way that maybe if she had been a little nicer about introducing these abusive tendencies to her children, that maybe they would actually have gone along with it instead of fighting her on it. I doubt it. Ruby does agree with her own thought, though, that yes, if it could have worked better and the kids would have complied, but she thinks they would have still not been repenting, only acting as if they were. Quote, "They need things to get hard fast, intense, shaking change, immediate discomfort, stress to their systems. Why? Because they divulged their secrets." I don't know what she means by that. But she goes on to say she thinks they should have taken responsibility for the harm that they are doing by being possessed, which they're not possessed. So what harm? You're creating the harm, Ruby. Ruby thinks that if they had started more comfortably, the hypnosis and sleep the child are under from the demons would have stayed with them. They needed to wake them up to reality and show them where they really are, in hell. And that's why she thinks that maybe it wouldn't be so good if they had been nicer about it. She needed it to be immediate, flip of a switch. You are now doing all of these things because you're possessed. She says that she was hoping that the children would see the state of their sins and go to God for forgiveness and admit the awful state that they are in. But instead, they hide and they lie to themselves that what they did wasn't bad, that they are victims, and that Ruby and Jodi are persecutors, that God and hell aren't real. Quote, "They deny the power of God." Ruby tells her child, the 12-year-old, that he is sedating his choices to do wicked things. And he says, "I don't want that anymore." She says, "Yes, you do. You stood alone with only you and your choices, and you literally would stand it. You ran away. You refused to sit and stand with your choices. And now you are in the house with milk, air conditioning, and a book, and you quite like it, don't you?" And he says, "Yes, ma'am." She says, if you really didn't want evil anymore, you would say, Mom, thanks for the book, but I want to do boxes today. Or, I want to stand with my choices. You won't do that, will you? And he says, no, ma'am. See, I want to make it clear to you, you have not made any shifting or change. You are damning your soul. And he goes back to the writing that he's doing, taking notes on the book, and he says, yes, ma'am. And she calls him a weak, undisciplined little brat. Not to his face, but just in the journal entry, calls him undisciplined, weak little brat. Ruby leaves a small note to herself at the bottom of this entry that says she had never seen the devil clearly or true wickedness until recently, and that because she didn't see it, she did not combat the devil. She feels that she patted evil and placated wickedness. She says her love of God was sincere, but she assumed others' love for God was sincere as well, but she had been deceived. So she's basically blaming the kids, saying, like, I didn't see this soon enough because the kids hid it too well. I believe that the kids would be holy and godly and not wicked, and I shouldn't have believed that. I believed too strongly that these people also believed in God like I did, which I don't even know how she justifies these things to herself. It sounds so crazy to someone like me who's not religious, and I feel so fucking bad for these kids. There is an entire entry for July 19th, but the entire thing is redacted. So the next time after that one, that redacted one, is on July 23rd. So between the last one that we can read, which is on the 16th, and the 23rd, there's no entries that we can see. So that's like a week or so that she didn't write anything down. We don't really know exactly what happened during that week. So for the July 23rd entry, Ruby says that in order to go from evil towards God, all darkness must be exposed to the light. Once the lies and sin are revealed, the body must engage in good work. Good work needs to be painful, otherwise the service becomes another feel-good distraction. So she's basically saying, if you want to do a good thing, you can't do it because it feels good. It needs to be painful, otherwise it's something that you like to do, and therefore it's not good, which that makes no sense. Good work does not need to be painful. If you're helping someone, it doesn't need to hurt you. You don't need to hurt to give good to someone else, and they don't need to hurt to give you something. Like, that makes no fucking sense. She says she's spent the day fasting and praying after learning her children are the spawns of Satan. She says the 12-year-old has been out of control, peeing and pooping his pants, lying, stealing, and running away. The 9-year-old is crying and wailing. She says no one could understand it unless they were there, how bad things have gotten. Jodi and Ruby take the 9-year-old out to the desert. The girl screamed and screamed, apparently, and I don't blame her. Jodi found a native cemetery on a reservation where the 9-year-old tried to escape barefoot into the heat. So the 9-year-old had also tried to run away. That's a new information that we did not know until this came out. She screamed for another family, food, water, care, and love. And then Ruby says, "Oh, 9-year-old, a manipulative ploy. You are loved." I don't know about you, but I don't want that type of love, and I feel terrible that this girl had to go through that. She screamed for a couple hours and spoke nonsense, according to Ruby, and then laid down in the road quietly. And after that, they took her home for the night. The next day, they took the 9-year-old, the 12-year-old, and the 14-year-old out, and they didn't give the 9-year-old or the 12-year-old shoes because they wanted them to be uncomfortable, but they also wanted to prevent them from trying to run away again. They made them clean the cemetery of big sagebrush, pokies, thorns, and broken glass. They filled many large bags and put them in Jodi's truck bed. Ruby says the kids mellowed out a bit, but that the 12-year-old cheated and looked for shade. Ruby says this is the 3rd day in a row that they had done this 5 hours of cleaning and weed pulling. She said the 12-year-old finally started to get the hang of it. He said, "This is getting easier. I feel like I'm getting stronger. I want to pull the weed out of my heart. What am I doing with my life? I don't want to live like this anymore." And again, I don't feel like he's saying those things because he means them. He's saying those things because that's what she wants to hear. He's learning what she wants to hear, and so he's saying it. Ruby then says that all the kids need to experience of obnoxious weeds, sweating in the sun, working while thirsty, and knowing what doing an anonymous act of service feels like. She says the 12-year-old and the 9-year-old are finally starting to see how nice the cemetery looks after many days of their hard work on it. Ruby then says that the day prior, the 12-year-old was devious and put his head in a toilet because he was hot and wanted to cool off. Jodi and Ruby told him how disgusting and devious it is. He was probably just so thirsty and so hot that he didn't even care that it was toilet water. He just needed some kind of relief, and they were wanting to keep him uncomfortable all day, every day, because they want this demon to come out of him. And she says that it's a problem, that her son has no problem being so gross. He's a 12-year-old boy. What 12-year-old boy isn't gross? It's so many times that I see them saying these things are demonic that are just normal things a child does. I don't understand how they got to the point of thinking that it was a demon. Children just act like children. I don't get it. I don't get it. On July 25th at 8:30 a.m., Ruby takes the 9-year-old, the 12-year-old, and the 14-year-old to this cemetery again. They each get a bag and pick up broken glass and weeds. They work for about 15 minutes until a red vehicle with a native woman shows up. Now, in her journal entries, she refers to this native woman as Indian. I'm not going to do that because that's offensive. They aren't Indian. They are native. They are native women, Native Americans. So she sits and watches for about 15 minutes, taking pictures and video of what Ruby and the kids are doing. Ruby tells the kids to stay near her and to turn their faces away from the woman's camera so that they can not be recorded and not have their faces shown, but to continue weeding. So she wants them to continue their punishment, just doesn't want anyone to film it. The woman gets out of her car and walks towards Ruby, saying, "What are you doing here? You don't belong here. This isn't your land. You are trespassing." Ruby tells the woman that she is weeding. The woman says, "How would you feel if I came and poked around your cemetery? What are you stealing?" Ruby says, "Nothing. We are weeding, picking up trash." The woman asks what is in the bags. Ruby says, "Weeds and broken glass. You can see for yourself." The woman tells her to leave the bags and get off of her land, saying, "It's not good enough for you that you come and take all our land. Now you want more. What you have isn't good enough. You have to come take our cemeteries too. What is wrong with you? You are not raised right. So much disrespect." And Ruby replies, "I do not mean any disrespect. I'm honoring your people. I'm offering," and then the woman cuts her off and doesn't let her speak. Ruby gets the kids and takes them to the car as the woman yells to the kids that they will grow up to be just like their mother, white and full of privilege. And the woman says, "Mind your own business. Get out. I'm filing a police report." And Ruby tells the kids to get into the car. The woman asks her to wait so that she can take a picture of them and a picture of the license plate. And Ruby says, "I don't think so." And then they drive off as she stumbles to get the camera app to open on her phone. Ruby says that this woman was projecting all of her anger and aggression onto her. She said Ruby was walking around like she owned the place, but Ruby says that is actually what the woman was doing. She says this woman wasn't raised right and she's disrespectful. Ruby talked to the 9-year-old and the 12-year-old about how the woman was attacking them with her distortion, which is one of those words that the Connections cult used, that if you're not living in truth, which is Mormon religion, then you are in distortion. So she believes because this woman has trauma because of the way that her people were colonized, that she's living in distortion. That's crazy. Ruby says that a few days prior, a woman thanked them for helping keep the graveyard clean, but now this other woman tells them that they are aggressive, and when she's really the aggressive one. Ruby says she is helping the kids, and they mock and reject her help. God sent her to help them repent, and they turn her away. The kids seem to be affected by what happened with the native woman yelling at them, but because they are so numb, Ruby doesn't know how long it will hold. She says the 12-year-old is very emotional, but the 9-year-old not so much. Ruby says the 9-year-old is seeing and hearing evil. She told the 9-year-old that she invited evil and it's her charge to now send it away. Quote, "You created this, 9-year-old. The good news is because you created this, you can destroy this. Send them away." There's a short entry on July 30th where Ruby and Jodi put the 9-year-old in a closet to contemplate what to do. I think it's probably the closet off the bathroom again. She screamed for most of the day inside of this closet. They didn't give her any water because she was screaming. And they said they only give her water if she's not screaming. And then Ruby says that the girl refuses to eat, but I guarantee you they weren't even trying to give her food anyway. The next day, on July 31st, Jodi wakes up from a dream where God let her know that they have both done everything they can to get the 9-year-old's attention. The Lord told them to stop the physical interventions as they only bring resentment, and that the 9-year-old is angry about her feet, most likely just being sore from being barefoot all the time, walking around with no shoes on every place they go, and also all the work they were doing barefoot. He told Jodi to dress the girl's wounds and leave her to him. So Ruby says the intervention gives the 9-year-old the opportunity to soften and to see that they aren't hurting her, even though they are absolutely hurting her. Jodi cleanses her feet, her heels, and uses hydrogen peroxide to clean the wounds from being tied up, but it didn't sting because the girl is used to it. So she's so used to being in pain that the hydrogen peroxide cleaning her wounds she didn't even react to it. Ruby says the spirit was very strong as her and the 14-year-old witnessed Jodi cleaning what didn't deserve to be cleaned. And after dressing the wounds, Jodi carried her back to the closet where she screamed and sulked and asked for water. Ruby gave her some leftovers from the past several meals that she says that the girl wouldn't eat, and the girl does eat some of it. Ruby then gives her some water and the scriptures and says that this is the first time she's ever been given the opportunity to read since going to Jodi's house. So she's been there almost 3 months. The son had already been given books before, but not the 9-year-old. Because she screams and wails, they were keeping water from her and they were keeping books from her. While giving her the scriptures, Ruby says to her daughter, "When you see God, he will judge you out of these books. Did you honor your mother? No. Did you keep his commandments? No. Did you repent? No. You are in big trouble. You better get really familiar with what's in here." And then Ruby goes on to talk about how the 12-year-old has really swollen feet from standing and that he is angry that no one cares about it. Ruby tells him he is acting like a man having a heart attack and gets his feelings hurt because nobody cares about the sliver in his finger. Quote, "When your soul is dying, nobody cares about your feet." So she's basically telling him no one cares about the pain you're in because you are tainted with evil due to this demonic possession. You shouldn't even care about your feet right now. You should care more about your soul. That's where Ruby's at right now, thinking that her son's suffering is a good thing. On August 1st, Jodi and the 14-year-old go to Tucson, Arizona again to look at a 500-acre property, and the 9-year-old and 12-year-old are both being defiant and unwilling to soften, according to Ruby. She says that the 9-year-old perpetually screams outside all week. And Jodi and Ruby took her to Hell Hole Road, which is a road that's on the way to Las Vegas, and they made her run back and forth on the dirt road. Ruby says she ran for a bit and then started manipulating. Ruby told her to run up an incline on a hillside, touch the tree, and return. It was about 100 yards. Ruby says she threw herself into a tree. Jodi pulled her out, breaking her flip-flops in the process, and after an hour of the 9-year-old jumping in bushes, they got in Jodi's truck and found a cactus. Ruby says the 9-year-old threw herself into the middle of the cactus and called it inhuman, the way that she did that. Ruby says she acted like it didn't hurt at all and cuddled into it, pressing her foot against a cactus ear. Ruby watched with her mouth open, commenting about how numb her daughter is. The 9-year-old got up off the cactus and spoke with Jodi for about 10 minutes before Jodi walked her back to the truck and Ruby rolled down the window. The 9-year-old asked for permission to speak, which was granted by Ruby. She asks for another chance at running up the hill, because they had stopped her because she was not doing what they said she was supposed to. They drive to the hill, and the 9-year-old gets out and goes to Ruby's window. She says, "Mother, what would you like me to do?" Ruby told her to run to the dead tree and then come back. The girl replies, "I'd rather jump into a cactus." Ruby calls her evil and deceitful. Ruby states that the girl would rather be shot and killed than to humble and do what she is told to do. Ruby says there is no pain point where her daughter will turn from evil. Basically, she's saying, I could abuse her even worse than this, and she's still going to act like this. So why are you doing it then? If you think that nothing you can do can help your child, then why are you still doing it? The next day, on August 2nd, Ruby says her and Jodi are still away. The 9-year-old is distracted by being in the house, getting socks, being held and carried, and being away from the elements. She says that the girl reads her Bible, eats beans, rice, and chicken, and that she is quiet. The 12-year-old sat outside yesterday and didn't manipulate, according to Ruby. He said it is because he wants to change. Ruby replied when he says he wants to change and said, "No, that's not true. You didn't manipulate because you weren't uncomfortable. You weren't hot." She basically says if they're manipulating, basically anything that goes against what they want is considered manipulation to her, and that she says they're only going to do it when they're uncomfortable. So because they have what they wanted, they've laid off the punishment a little bit, they've gotten food, they got to read. She's basically saying because you're not uncomfortable anymore, you don't need to manipulate today. So you're not because you don't have to, but you would if you needed to. Which, yeah, most people would manipulate to get food and water if they needed to, if they were starving. Idiot. So she sends him outside to stand on the patio by her room, by the sliding glass door where he escaped from, and it's raining outside. So she asks him, the rain is doing what? And he says, washing what it touches, the rocks. And she says, yes, you desecrated those rocks, and the rain is cleaning them. Let it clean you, too. But below this, it says that he pooped himself and that he was angry later in the day. So she was saying that he desecrated the rocks by spelling out a message after running away. How do you desecrate a rock? What? A few days later, on August 6th, Ruby says that the 12-year-old's rage comes out because he can't serve the devil, aka have no responsibility and have mom tout on him and coddle him. She says he wants her to feed him, hug him, be tender with him, shower him in praise and affection, and let him lie to her and abuse her. She says he raged for hours, saying, fuck you, at least 50 times. Quote, I'm not going to lie anymore. I'm never going to change. And then he says, quote, take me to jail where I belong. The next day, on August 7th, Ruby says someone is coming to fix Jodi's basement so she can sell the home. So probably that weird basement where they found the safe. I wonder if they had to do some type of renovations to these weird parts of her house that were made specifically to abuse children so that they could sell it. Because if they didn't do these changes to it, someone would see it as a torture chamber and they would not want to buy the house. That's my opinion. I think that's why. And Ruby is saying it's great news that they're going to sell the house. And she says that the 12-year-old that day is yelling obscenities. Jodi asked the 9-year-old and the 12-year-old what they are going to say when they see God. Fuck you. And the 12-year-old said, sure. They gave the 12-year-old a full day of punishments. They didn't specify what. Probably lots of standing in the sun, boxes, trampoline, any of those horrible things that they do. No food, one of those. At the end of the day, he was docile and compliant. And the 9-year-old cried all day but was still compliant and did what they asked. On August 8th, Ruby calls the 12-year-old defiant because she found him with poop on his fingers, which kids that are abused will play with their feces. They'll pee, poop themselves. Those are all signs of severe abuse. She says he keeps pooping and peeing his pants, and that within 5 minutes of going into the bathroom, he went in his pants and tried to hide it from her. Ruby then says that later on, the spirit told her to ask him some questions from an assumptive position. And then there's a huge section below this of the rest of this journal entry that's all completely redacted. So whatever questions that she asked him, we don't know what they are. They were completely removed from the PDF file that they released with all of the journal entries on it. On the next day, August 9th, Ruby puts a conversation between her and the 12-year-old. Quote, you keep saying you are unwilling to do uncomfortable things, but I watch you continuously do uncomfortable things the devil tells you to do. This isn't really about being uncomfortable. This is about adamantly refusing obedience. You would rather be uncomfortable than to be obedient. Is that true? And he says, yes, ma'am. When did you sell your soul to the devil? And he says, 2 or 3. She says, did he come to you or you to him? And he says, he came to me. She says, and what is he giving you in exchange for your soul? Money? Fame? Strength? A person? And he says, nothing. Ruby tells him he can still keep his soul, have a life, and stay there with them. And she tells him to think about whether he wants to be obedient to a devil who offers nothing in exchange for everything. He becomes aggressive and destructive, banging and hitting doors. So Ruby kicks him and yells, knock this off. That's the first time they've ever shown her being actually physically abusive by putting her hands on him. Obviously it was her foot for that one. She kicked him, but she literally kicked him over this. He continued to be destructive and violent, so Ruby puts on a pair of boots, goes in and kicks him again. She now has thick boots on. She kicks him again. This is what I meant when I said that near the end this thing goes right off the rails, because it just gets so bad right at the end. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that it would get worse than what I had already read, but it did. She says, do you want me to stop? What are you getting from Satan when he tells you to kick the door? Huh? Nothing but more pain. You want me to help you? Yes? No? You want me to feed you? And he says, yes. And she says, no. You want to serve the devil and fight me and destroy all that I provide and then expect me to give to you? Go ask the devil to help you. Go ask the devil to feed you. She leaves and the 12-year-old is quiet and contained in the closet. As she left, she yelled, "I get that you're rageful. I get that you're angry. You should be. But you've got to aim that anger in the correct direction. You keep aiming it at me, and I'm trying to help you get your life back. Get angry and denounce Satan." And when she left, he was quiet for a bit. Then he started calling Satan a big lying piece of baloney. He continues raging from inside the closet, raging, yelling, and crying, saying, quote, "I believed you, and what do you give me? Nothing but pain. You lie, and I've believed you. I'll admit it. I've been a fool to follow you, but no more. It's not too late. I can turn my life around. Get lost. I can get my life back through obedience." Ruby wonders if he was being sincere, saying only his actions will show. She probably believes he's just saying it to say it, which, I mean, who wouldn't, if they're being abused like that, learn what the person wants to say and just say it? I definitely did that. I said things I didn't believe all the time because I didn't want to get into it with my mom, you know? Ruby then says that he peed his pants to manipulate her. And she says, "You cannot manipulate your way out of pain. The only way out of pain is to humble yourself. You need to pray and show God how you have desecrated your precious body, how you misuse your body. Beg him to help you." And he says, "I've been such a fool. I don't want to make these choices anymore. Please hear me, God. I won't live this way. Obedience is the way. I've desecrated my soul. I know I can change. I still have a chance. My chance is getting smaller and smaller. I'm not going to choose this anymore. I'm not going to make myself a fool anymore. I've made myself such a fool. I believe all those lies, and all they bring me is pain. God, I've made and chosen to be so idiotic. I've been so aggressive, so vile, so mean. God, please hear me. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen." That sounds a lot like something Ruby would say, and not like something a 12-year-old would say. I don't think he said all of that. I think that she just wrote a paragraph. Like, he probably said some things that were a lot less crazy or a lot less religious than that, like more smaller sentences, or like being like, "Oh, I've been a fool," but like all of that other stuff that just, you know, when like family vlogging people, or like people that have like a kid on their Facebook page and they want to talk about having a conversation with their 2-year-old, and then it says all this like stuff where you're like, your child did not say that. That's what this feels like to me. It feels like Ruby putting words in his mouth. I don't think he actually said most of that stuff. On August 10th, Ruby is watching the 12-year-old inside the closet with the 9-year-old on the back patio while it's raining. She tells the 12-year-old that the rain is cleaning the rocks from dirt and the 12-year-old's pee from the day prior. And then she tells the 9-year-old to feel the rain clean her, and says that she can be as clean as she wants. She then asks the 12-year-old what he is thinking about, and he says, "How my choices have led me here." She then says, "Did you know you were in a dark pit of despair?" And he says, "What do you mean?" And then the entire paragraph underneath is completely redacted with the word "chilling" underneath underlined. And then after that, it talks about that the 9-year-old stood in the rain for 2 hours that day. After that entry, there is 4 full pages of redactions, and it's anywhere between August 10th and August 15th, because those are the only dated entries before and after all of the redactions. On August 15th, Ruby talks about the fact that the 12-year-old would have never disclosed his sins had he not had hope that confessing would bring some type of relief. She says it wasn't because he's humble now, it's because his motive was to feel better. Because of all the distractions were taken away and any beliefs he was getting them back were banished because they were consistent and followed through, he was left with only one outlet to find relief: confession. She says the world today does not support children being uncomfortable. The adults are uncomfortable with children being uncomfortable, so children are comforted, entertained, and distracted from the need to confess and change. She says that stripping down a child's world to the basics of beans, rice, and hard work would be considered abuse. Not would be considered abuse, Ruby, that is abuse. But then Ruby goes on to say that it's not abuse. She says it's necessary for a prideful child to go through those things. She then goes on to say that the 12-year-old has all of his behaviors out. He feels like a failure, a monster, useless, and worthless. The relief he felt in confession was short-lived, and now there is nowhere to hide, so he becomes aggressive, destructive, combative, uses foul language she's never heard, and she says it's only a distraction. Poop, pee, damage. When the despair comes in, he is weak, infectious, hopeless, and never felt worse. And it was a setup from the devil, and now comes the work. She then goes on to say that it's been 3 months of consistent boundaries and putting up with him terrorizing to get this confession out. She says she doesn't know of anyone who would do this in the real world, feed their kid beans, lentils, rice, and chicken for 3 months straight and refuse all distractions. So yes, they were getting the same food every day on purpose, per her admission. They did that on purpose so that they were going through the same thing every single day. It was just the same foods, only water or milk, and then some days they didn't even get to eat, and then they would just do all of these physically uncomfortable tasks all day. That was all they got to do. They barely even got to read, per her admission as well. She says that this is why Americans are full of sin and are ready for destruction, because they won't repent their sins. On August 16th, she says it is day 2 of the 12-year-old jumping on a mini trampoline. She said he needs a lot of help with balance and coordination, most likely because he's emaciated and he's starving and he has wounds on his arms and legs. Of course he's going to have trouble with balance and coordination. She asked him to take off one sock by balancing on the opposite foot. He fell over, hit his nose on the ground, and he started bleeding. Ruby gave him a wet rag and toilet paper to wipe his face. She says he dabbed his face just to smear the blood around, then blew his nose so hard through the toilet paper he got blood on his face and all over his shirt. She said when he asked to do the easiest exercise, he refuses with the decrepit stature you would expect of a 90-year-old man, acting helpless. She says his body is full of evil, puffy, infectious, and he won't participate in the responsibility of flushing it out. Probably because she doesn't have a demon, Ruby. She says his life has no meaning and purpose, and his purpose has been don't get caught this entire time. But now that he's caught, he wants to be done with life, and he feels it has no meaning. Then the other half of the page is redacted. It may not be the same day. It might be a different entry from a different day, but it's completely redacted either way. On August 21st, the only thing in that entry is Ruby says that the 12-year-old responds to poking, pouring cold water, and towel whipping, and that it would be a good strategy or technique that they can use going forward. On August 22nd, she says it is the first day the 12-year-old soaked and jumped as he was told. I think she means by soaked that they would give them cold water baths. And he did wet his pants twice that day, though. So she sees that as a bad thing, that he's manipulating again or something. She said God pelted hail from the heavens to poke the 12-year-old also, to try to get him to do what's right. He stayed jumping with Ruby, saying the hail is a mystery where they are a heavenly validation for this intervention, because it doesn't hail much in Utah, apparently. She thinks that weather means God is talking to her. After this entry, there are 6 full pages of redactions again, probably from the days between August 22nd and August 27th, as those are the last dated entries. We're on to the last entry now, 8/27, August 27th. The 16-year-old visited for a week and picked up by Ruby on the 20th. The 14-year-old, 16-year-old, Pam, and Ruby packed up 20 boxes and took them to a storage shed. They were preparing to move at that time. The 16-year-old gave a 2-week notice at her job since they were going to move to a different state from Utah to Arizona. The 12-year-old spent the 22nd to the 25th peeing and pooping, out of control, defiant, abusive, and mean, according to Ruby. He refused to do what she asked, and when she thinks she found a technique that works, he digs in and fights harder against it. She was willing to try anything that would grab his attention, so she whipped him with a belt. That's the one that really, it's like, this is the last entry. And it's still escalating. It escalated from what they were already doing to sedation, to kicking him with boots on, and now whipping with a belt. And then she goes on to say that she also whipped the 9-year-old with the belt because she peed all over Jodi's garage floor. Ruby screamed at her and lied to her, saying that she is out of control. The 9-year-old seemed to give Ruby her attention after being hit with the belt. Yeah, obviously. She swept the garage with muscle and mopped. That was the way that Ruby put it. She did a good job of sweeping and mopping the garage after peeing in it. Ruby said she did do a good job and that the 12-year-old after increased his defiance. Then the last page is some random little notes, and the second half of it is redacted. Nothing important on that page to report on. So that is the end of the journal entry. I don't even really have much to say to debrief after all of this. All I can say is going through this was very hard for me because I just cannot believe they were hiding these things so well. None of us knew this kind of thing was actually happening, this bad. Who could have guessed that she would think her kids have demons inside of them? I knew that they were like strict parents and that they were not good people and that they were harming their kids. I didn't know it was this bad. I mean, it was straight up physical torture that they did to these poor kids. And I just wanted to make sure people had access to this. It's very hard to go through those 60 pages. They're handwritten. It's much harder to go through. So I hope that if somebody wanted to know what they contained, that this video could help and make it so that you didn't have to go through all of that yourself, because it is pretty hard. It took me several hours over multiple days to get through it all because of how bad it is. And if you just watched this whole video, you heard all that crazy shit that she just said. So the fact that she is now trying to act like she's sobered up and doesn't believe what Jodi was saying anymore, or acting like she didn't have as much to do with it and that Jodi did most of it, it's absolutely not true. These journal entries are all from Ruby, and they all show that she was one of the driving forces behind it. Maybe Jodi was a little bit more of the leader of everything, but she still had just as much to do with this as Jodi did. And I just wanted to make sure that this information gets out there to the people. So thank you for watching. If you watched the whole thing, I really appreciate that. I've never researched more than I have today for this video. And so if you like this video, please give it a like for all of the research I did, and subscribe to my channel, as I do commentary videos at least once a week. This one took me 2 weeks to do because it was so much. But yeah, thanks so much for watching, guys. Go watch a cute animal video or something after this. I know I'm gonna, because I'm so depressed right now after going through all this, but I felt it was important. I've been very fixated on this case for a while and just want people to know as much information about it as possible if they want to know. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope that you feel better after you watch some cute cat videos or something, and I'll see you next week. Bye.